Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. On the show tonight, Illinois Democrats at odds over so-called assault weapons ban. We have the latest.
As Bears fans put this season behind them, a new plan is unveiled to keep the Bears at Soldier Field.
New medical guidelines for children suffering from obesity are unveiled for the first time in 15 years.
Efforts to expand protection for trans Chicagoans and those seeking abortions advances in City Council.
Meet Exelon's newly appointed CEO as he takes charge at the Chicago-based energy giant.
Walgreens says it'll cut back on spending to fight shoplifting. That and more from Cranes.
I'm trying to make a statement.
We introduced you to a local photographer who's capturing the faces of U Chicago medicine.
That is how we slow and then stop this disease.
And two former Obama campaign staffers now in the race to stop ALS.
First, some of today's top stories. Governor J.B. Pritzker is sworn in for his second term in office.
According to the best of my ability.
Congratulations, Governor.
Thank you very much.
Today's inauguration comes as state lawmakers work on passing a so-called assault weapons ban. Also sworn in today, Lieutenant Governor Juliana Stratton, Attorney General Kwame Raoul, Secretary of State Alexi Janulius, Comptroller Susana Mendoza, and Treasurer Mike Frericks. And we'll have more on the proposed assault weapons ban later in this program.
Former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan will finally have his day in court next year. A federal judge has scheduled the trial for April 1st, 2024. 2 years after his initial indictment. Madigan is facing 23 counts that he allegedly participated in and benefited from a variety of corruption schemes. The former speaker is set to be tried alongside Michael McLean, one of his closest aides and confidants. Both have pleaded not guilty to all charges. Attorneys say the trial is scheduled to last 6 to 7 weeks.
CTA bus riders should check their schedules. The transit agency is making changes to nearly half of its routes. The CTA says these changes are expected to address the unpredictability of wait times, which is one of the most frequent comments the agency says it receives from customers. It's also aimed at helping improve the accuracy of its bus tracker. 52 bus routes will be affected by these schedule changes, which took effect yesterday. The agency says the changes better align scheduled service with the available workforce. The CTA, which says it's been working to address its worker shortage, is still short about 600 bus operators.
And coming up in the program, we speak with the man behind the proposed Soldier Field Dome.
But first, the fight over the proposed ban on assault weapons gets heated. And that's right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
A ban on so-called assault weapons could soon become law in Illinois. Within the last hour, the Illinois State Senate passed an assault weapons bill. The House passed a version of it over the weekend. The governor is likely to sign the bill into law as lawmakers got it in right before the lame duck session expires. And here's Governor J.B. Pritzker expressing his support for the ban in his inauguration speech earlier today.
Now, I'm a firm believer that government functions best when we look for compromise. But I'm done with the NRA having its way when it comes to mass shootings. Why do we allow anyone to easily purchase a rapid-fire, high-capacity weapon that can kill dozens of unarmed people in under a minute?
And joining us are Steve Patton, chairman of the Gun Violence Prevention Political Action Committee, or GPAC, and Richard Pearson, executive director of the Illinois State Rifle Association. And thank you both for joining us within the last hour as well. Pritzker's former opponent, Republican State Senator Darren Bailey, spoke in opposition to this bill. Let's take a look.
Friends, you've got to know that the actions that you're taking right now are tyrannous. You also must know that I and millions of other gun owners in this state will not comply.
All right, so let's take a look at what's in this bill. It's an immediate ban on assault weapons, 50 caliber rifles, cartridges. It bans rapid-fire devices, large-capacity magazines. Steve Patton, there's been a lot of changes over the last 24, 48 hours, so give us the finer points, the specifics of what exactly is in this bill.
Sure, happy to do so. The major changes that occurred in about the last 24 hours, and certainly since last week when the House passed the bill, is to expand and at the same time kind of tighten up the definition of what is an assault weapons. And that's a very important thing. Those states that have had assault weapon bans have experienced the gun manufacturers continually trying to do modifications to end run around the definition. So I think we have a very good state-of-the-art, best practice type of definition.
In terms of ammunition, how many rounds?
On rounds, it's a limit of 10 for rifles and 15 for handguns. And one of the other major changes since the House version is a requirement of, for existing assault weapons, affidavit and endorsement affidavit so that the ISP will have the Illinois State Police will have a record of serial numbers, makes, and model.
All right, so current owners of these weapons will have to register their serial numbers with the Illinois State Police. Richard
We wouldn't use the word register on that, but it is a filing of an affidavit that under oath that will provide information about all of the assault weapons they possess.
Understood. Okay. Richard Pearson, your reaction to this final Senate proposal that just passed?
Well, it's the same as it has been. We think the thing is patently unconstitutional. There should be no requirement for any right, the Second Amendment right, or any other right that you register anything for that. And so we're opposed to that. The magazine bans have been held unconstitutional in a couple courts, have been sent back to lower courts for review, but that hasn't been tried before the Illinois or the United States Supreme Court yet, but I imagine it's on the way there. So we're preparing to fight this in court should it pass the House.
Right. There are a couple states like Maryland, their gun ban or their assault weapon ban is remanded down to a lower court, likely to be heard at some point by the Supreme Court. Richard Pearson, specifically, what do you believe is unconstitutional about this bill, though?
Well, I think firearm registration is unconstitutional. All it does is a step toward confiscation of firearms. So it has a lot of problems with it.
We should be clear, though. We should be clear. The proponents of this bill are saying that current owners of these weapons do not have to give up their weapons. Just to be clear, that's what proponents are saying.
That's what they're saying, but when you register a firearm, it just gives the police the name and address for them to come and pick it up when they want to confiscate it. So that's really what's going on here.
Steve Patton, do you believe it's unconstitutional, the provision here, as you said, not registering, but to have current owners of these weapons to file an affidavit with the state police?
Yeah, absolutely is constitutional. There are two recent cases at lower court levels so far on large capacity magazine bans. Both of them have held that those are not even firearms subject to Second Amendment protection. And both resoundingly affirmed the constitutionality of bans on high-capacity magazines. There's no confiscation here. Existing assault weapons, owners can continue to possess those, but they do have to, and it's not really registration, it's an endorsement of their FOID card, and they file an affidavit that say, I own 3 assault weapons. Here are the models, make, and serial numbers. And that way, the state police, for law enforcement purposes, there's a specific restriction on the use of this information, confidentiality, only for law enforcement purposes. For example, if one of these weapons is recovered at a crime scene, then the state police has a record of it.
The state has red flag laws as well, although it's had trouble enforcing those laws. Richard Pearson, is there any part of this bill that the State Rifle Association is prepared to support, or any aspect of this?
Well, there's part of it, the switches thing probably is governed by federal law, so it's already against the law to do that. But The rest of it, the answer is no.
Richard Pearson, what would be a more effective route? Because no one can deny what happened in Highland Park, what happens in Chicago on a daily basis, mass shootings that occur in this country with seeming regularity, with frightening regularity. What's a better route forward?
Well, first of all, we keep saying enforce the laws that you have. Now, there might be a crack or two in those laws, and those could be fixed. One of the things I believe that when the state police issue a FOID card, they should be able to access juvenile records. So I think that would be important, and that would actually have taken care of the Highland Park problem. But but other than that, there's just simply the enforcement. You get a carjacker, and he is literally out in 2 hours back on the street. He's not kept in jail, and he carjacks again. And then everybody that sees him, all his friends say, wow, he was in and out. Maybe I can do that. If I get away with it, good. If I don't, I'm in there. I got to spend 2 hours in jail. Big deal.
Steve Patton, Richard Pearson mentioned problems enforcing the laws that are on the books, red flag laws. Robert Cremo Jr., the alleged Highland Park shooter, had a legal FOID card, was legally allowed to possess that gun. How is the state going to be able to enforce these new provisions?
Well, the ban on manufacture, sales, and so forth have proven effective. And the state does have the enforcement authority and the ability to detect and foreclose or prosecute for illegal purchases of weapons that are unlawful. So this should make a difference. But I tell you, from my own personal standpoint, why I have gotten involved in this issue since I left the city 6 years ago is because I think it's one piece of a mosaic, and it includes enforcement of the laws and other pieces, but to address the epidemic of gun violence in our city. And if you follow the news reports, the daily news reports, increasingly our officers are confronting crime scenes where they recover 40, 50, 60, 80 spent shell casings. And the reports are that someone pulls up in a car, takes a pistol, a 9mm pistol, which has an extended magazine on it, and that's essentially a machine gun. Right. When you add a rapid fire. And it can discharge scores of bullets in a matter of seconds.
And so all those things addressed in this law. And we should mention that it does have to go back to the House now because it is slightly different from the version the House passed. It does look like the House is in agreement with this law, so it does look like it will pass and the governor will sign. For now, our thanks to Steve Patton and Richard Pearson. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you. Good evening.
You're welcome. And now to Brandis and some expanded protections cleared by a city council committee today. Brandis.
Paris, a measure designed to expand protections for trans Chicagoans and those seeking abortions won unanimous support of a key city panel. The proposed ordinance now heads to the full city council for a vote where it is also expected to pass. WTTW News reporter Heather Sharon joins us now with more. And Heather, we know that this proposal has the support of Mayor Lori Lightfoot as well as Nancy Andrade, the chair of the Commission on Human Relations. So let's real quick listen to what she told the city council's Health and Human Relations Committee.
No one should experience discrimination or retaliation for decisions they make about their own bodies and healthcare needs, at home or in the workplace.
So Heather, how is this ordinance designed to work?
Well, it will give the Chicago Commission on Human Relations the ability to probe complaints from people who say they've been discriminated against because of their healthcare choices in terms of reproduction and gender-affirming care. It will also give the city's Office of Labor Standards the ability to investigate employers who are accused of discriminating against people who've made those same choices.
Okay, so this measure expands an ordinance passed by the City Council in September. This was shortly after, we all know, the U.S. Supreme Court ended the constitutional right to an abortion. What does that law do?
So that law prevents any city agency, including the Chicago Police Department, from helping other states or other law enforcement agencies probe people who travel to Illinois to get this kind of care, either abortions or other gender-affirming care. It also protects the doctors and other healthcare professionals who perform that service from investigations as well.
Okay, so while this measure heads to a final vote at the City Council for a meeting set on January 18th, a bill focused on these issues is awaiting a vote in the Illinois Senate. What would that legislation do?
So it's very similar. It would extend protections to those who perform these services for people who travel from outside of Illinois. It would also expand access to birth control and medication abortion, which of course is growing in popularity as the number of clinics fill up because of the huge demand for abortion services.
Yes, we've heard a lot about those wait lists because, Chicago's seen an influx of people seeking abortions and other reproductive health care services since this Supreme Court decision. How is the city helping providers who are trying to manage all this demand?
Well, there is $3.1 million in the city's 2023 budget to help facilitate these groups and help them, give them additional capacity. The question is, will it be enough as more states move to restrict abortion, even though some states still allow it?
Okay, an ongoing situation. Heather, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brandis.
And you can read Heather's full story on our website, WTTW.com/news. And we're back with more Chicago Tonight right after this.
Our culture is vibrant, it's rich, it's fun.
We try to focus on, hey, let me help you. This is what Chicago is. This is Little Village.
The next couple of months should reveal a lot about the future of the Chicago Bears. The season wasn't much, but they do have the first pick in the upcoming NFL draft. The team is also expected to make a decision on a potential new stadium in Arlington Heights, which is why the mayor and a prominent developer are trying to sell the team on some dazzling new changes to Soldier Field in a Hail Mary attempt to keep the team in Chicago. Yesterday, developer Bob Dunn released the details, with a glass dome being the highlight of the reimagined Soldier Field. And here to share his vision for Soldier Field and what it might cost is Bob Dunn, president of Landmark Development and advisor to the Lightfoot administration on this topic. Bob Dunn, welcome back to Chicago Tonight.
Thank you.
So this is a $2.2 billion estimated renovation proposal. Why do you believe this is a better option for the Bears than having their own stadium that they build on land that they own in Arlington Heights?
Well, I think there's several reasons. You start with the economics. When this plan was first unveiled last summer, there were a lot of questions. What will it cost to build? What can it do in terms of generating revenue? We've spent our time from then until now really developing out design, engineering, further proving that the economic advantage here, we believe, is significant when compared to building a new stadium on a greenfield site somewhere.
And we should run that animation, because you put out an animation yesterday of what you envision for this new stadium. Glass dome, as we mentioned, new seats. What are some of the other finer points?
Well, there's, we think, 8 primary elements of the stadium that really drive the economics, drive the fan experience, change game day. When we say change game day, that means things like transportation. Bringing as many as 40% or more of the fans to the building on game day on rail rather than by car. I mean, one of the real limitations of Soldier Field today is its accessibility on game day. Beyond that, you have to have an entertainment district, to really create a day's worth of entertainment. I mean, it's been done now dominantly all over the country, really all over the world. These sports venues are anchoring urban entertainment districts. Then once you come inside the building, as you see on the images, it's really about creating just a dramatically different fan experience for all fans on game day. And that's really what's unique about Soldier Field. I think the video does as good a job as you can do of showing how you can overcome the functional limitations of the stadium and truly create something that's one of a kind in the NFL, really in all of professional sports, taking a building that's got 100 years of history and really making it the defining building in sports going forward.
All right, so the question on everybody's mind, who do you think would foot the bill for this? Would this be the team? Because it does feel like there is no appetite for any kind of public subsidy for sports franchises.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, clearly today, the dominant percentage of cost is being covered by the team or by teams. It's a trend that's evolved over the last 20 years as a lot of stadiums have been built around the country, but certainly in the larger markets, we've seen this trend where if not all the cost, the majority of the cost is funded by the team. And I think that's likely going to be the case. It has to be the case here. I think at the same time, you have to keep in mind that Soldier Field is a public building. It's going to have a future. What its future is will be determined in the weeks and months ahead as the Bears make the decision they have to make on the future, what's best for the future of the franchise. But having said that, it's a publicly owned asset. If the Bears go away, it's going to require a massive infusion of capital to transform the building to become something, to attract tenants and to attract fans and whatever its use is going to be in the future. So I think the key point right now is this a measurably better advantage for a team like the Bears? And I think the answer to that is unquestionably yes, when you can save as much as $1.5 billion of cost versus building a new stadium and drive substantially more revenue.
But you mentioned the fact it is a public building. The Bears and the Park District, which owns Soldier Field, have had a contentious relationship over many decades. There is an appeal to owning your own stadium. Stadium experts say that is sort of what owners want. So would there be a way for the Bears to perhaps acquire the building to own it? Would that be more enticing to them if they own this as opposed to leased it from the city?
Yeah, I think what we have to keep in mind, you look across the landscape of the U.S., every major city has built a stadium or stadiums in the last 20 years. Nearly every one of those buildings today is publicly owned. But what's changed is the responsibility and the financing, the funding to design, build, finance, operate, maintain has shifted largely to the team, while the buildings mostly remain publicly owned. I don't think there's any question that same type of operating model can be put in place with Soldier Field, different than the structure that's in place today that gives the team the control, the revenue rights, takes away a lot of the limitations that exist with Soldier Field.
And I got to say, you certainly have a vested interest in this as a developer, because you have proposed the one central development just to the west of Soldier Field over those train tracks. You've asked for as much as close to $4 billion in state funding because you want to build a big transit hub, as you mentioned there. What's the status of this? Especially given the fact that, again, the state doesn't look like it's very hungry to subsidize private development right now.
Well, I think 2 points I would make on that. Number one, the civic build phase of One Central, which is a nearly $4 billion project, is an infrastructure investment where 58% of the cost would be publicly funded over time, 42% would be privately funded. In other words, the private sector is putting substantial dollars, billions of dollars, into what is a publicly owned asset that drives for the state a 16-to-1 return, meaning the investment that the state makes over time, the state's getting back a 16-to-1 return on its investment. Normally, infrastructure that's financed in this country, be it an airport, a road, an academic building, you're doing well if you're generating a 1-to-1 or a 2-to-1 return. So what's important about One Central is, we've said from the beginning, in time, it should be judged on its merits. The state's now conducting a feasibility study to evaluate One Central on its merits. We believe that the merits will prove the value, and really Soldier Field is a great way to demonstrate the civic value, the civic importance of a project like One Central. It solves the transit, and it creates the entertainment district that any sports team is going to require in the future, particularly a sports team that locates in the core of a city.
All right, there's so many questions I have for you, but we are out of time, and we will watch these plans. A very interesting proposal here. Bob Dunn, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
And up next, a local couple in the race to stop ALS.
It's an illness that affects approximately 5,000 people each year. The progressive neurodegenerative disease, ALS, sometimes known as Lou Gehrig's disease. When a former Obama campaign staffer received his diagnosis, he was given 6 months to live. Now, 5 years later, what Brian Urlacher and his wife, Sandra Abravaya, have done has given new meaning to the advice, get your affairs in order. Despite his inability to use almost every limb of his body, Brian Urlacher is making no small plans.
I feel okay. I'm a bit tired, but from all of the things. But my mind is racing at full speed.
As his wife of 9 years, Sandra Abravaya translates almost his every word. He shares his thoughts.
I'm thinking about how we do a screening for the I'm ALS community.
The work he wants to accomplish.
I'm thinking about how we improve our care delivery for synaptic cure.
And the family he adores.
And I am thinking about our parent-teacher conferences this afternoon. Wait, where am I in this equation?
It's his way of responding to his illness, which may have slowed his body, but not his mind.
With every stressful situation, my response is to go to work. And I do that because it gives me a sense of purpose that ALS is trying to take away. And it also gives me a sense of power when I have no control of the disease. So for me, I want to go to work because it allows me to say, not today, ALS.
I stand before you today to announce my candidacy.
Brian and Sandra met working on Barack Obama's historic 2008 presidential campaign. Brian says he and Sandra applied that organizing know-how to their fight against ALS. Much of their journey is documented in the film, No Ordinary Campaign.
Sandra's described me as a golden retriever who sees the bright shiny object and runs at it, and this is a bright shiny object that I had to run at.
First, the pair started the nonprofit I Am ALS with the support of a number of medical professionals and colleagues. Then, they took the fight to their old stomping ground.
8:17, getting it close for 8:30 a.m. meeting.
Between 2019 and 2021, they successfully lobbied Congress to increase government spending on ALS research from $10 to $80 million a year. They also convinced Congress to pass legislation allowing people with ALS immediate access to benefits from Social Security without the requisite 5-month waiting period, a time window that can close quickly on an illness like ALS. Next, the group pushed the Food and Drug Administration to allow patients earlier access to promising but experimental drug treatments.
So if you can take one treatment and slow down your progression by 20%, and then take another treatment and slow it down by 10%, you've taken a disease that most people pass away from in 2 to 3 years and make it a disease where people can live 7 to 10 years. And that is everything. And that is how we end ALS.
One of those drugs is Relivrio, or AMX35, approved by the FDA in late September.
So we were able to help organize a campaign that made clear to the FDA that 10 more months of life for many people is living almost twice as long as their diagnosis gave them.
It's the first ALS drug to be approved in 5 years. Along the way, journalist Katie Couric joined their list of supporters, becoming an executive producer on the film. She's also someone who knows what it's like to care for a husband facing a terminal illness.
Their organizational skills and their experience as political operatives really gave them an in terms of understanding sort of the twists and turns of how to get legislation passed. That's something I think the average person would be overwhelmed by.
This team says it's evidence of how much faster change is happening for the ALS community.
What's really tough is when you have a debilitating illness like ALS, there are few survivors. So you don't have a built-in network of people who are advocating. But they have built a network, and they have just brought together this whole community. And whatever happens, this community is going to keep fighting.
And every victory has given Brian and Sandra hope that they can do more than beat the odds.
I think Brian and I still do authentically believe we have a chance to survive it. And we appreciate that it's just a chance, that we could be among the first survivors. And so we're going to fight for that every day, for ourselves, for our girls, and then for everybody else involved.
Not just for themselves, but for anyone facing a debilitating neurodegenerative illness. And the 2 daughters Brian desperately wants to see grow up.
Well, I want to be there to share with them how we fought and how we made ALS a disease that people can live with, because I know that they will grow up to be incredible people, and I want to be here to see that. Oh, are you saying I have a lot more bad dad jokes to tell?
And late last month, Congress approved $75 million for that expanded access grant program, which allows ALS patients earlier access to experimental treatments like Relivrio, which Brian received approval for and began taking just a couple of months ago. Last year, the National Institutes of Health received only $25 million to fund that expanded access grant program. Still to come on Chicago Tonight, former Bear Brian Urlacher is suing a hair transplant company. That and more business news from Cranes. For the first time in over a decade, there's new official guidance for treating childhood obesity. We'll hear what doctors recommend. One-on-one with Exelon's newly appointed CEO and president as he takes charge at the Chicago-based energy giant.
I'm trying to make a statement.
And we introduce you to a local photographer who's been assigned to capture the faces of U Chicago medicine. But first, some more of today's top stories. The families of 3 women who died of heat exposure in a Rogers Park senior building will get a $16 million settlement. The settlement will be divided equally among the 3 families of Dolores McNeely, Gwendolyn Osborne, and Janice Reed. They were found dead inside their own apartment units at James Snyder Apartments in Rogers Park last May. Autopsies showed all 3 died from excessive environmental heat exposure. Attorneys say the women died after several calls for help were ignored by building managers for days when temperatures were consistently over 90 degrees in the city. The National Women's Soccer League bans former Chicago Red Stars coach Rory Dames for life. The decision is part of a series of actions announced today that comes in response to a report last month detailing allegations of systemic abuse and sexual misconduct in the league. The league is also imposing a $1.5 million fine against the Red Stars. Buffalo Bills safety Damar Hamlin is now continuing his recovery back in Buffalo 1 week after going into cardiac arrest during a game. A doctor with the University of Cincinnati Medical Center says Hamlin was released to a healthcare team in Buffalo following an improvement in his condition. It comes after teams across the league paid tribute to Hamlin during games on Sunday. Hamlin tweeted in part today, quote, "Watching the world come together around me on Sunday was truly an amazing feeling. The same love you all have shown me is the same love that I plan to put back into the world and more." And now to Paris for some of today's top business headlines. Paris.
Brandis, Walgreens says it's peeling back spending on efforts to combat shoplifting. Machine company John Deere reaches a deal to let farmers repair their own equipment. And former Chicago Bear Brian Urlacher gets caught up in a hairy lawsuit. Here to go behind the headlines is Crane's Chicago business editor Ann Dwyer. Ann, great to see you. So let's start with that Walgreens story. The CFO there says the company may have spent too much on anti-theft efforts, and you did a bit of a mea culpa. What's going on here?
Well, the gist of it, Paris, seems to be that Walgreens did experience less retail theft, or what the industry calls shrink, this year compared to last year. And I think that basically they're sort of learning what works and what doesn't when it comes to dealing with these smash and grab and large retail theft swarms that tend to come in lately. We've seen a real uptick in that kind of activity since the pandemic began. And in fact, retail shrink accounted for almost $95 billion in losses in 2021. That's the most recent data available. But compare that to the year before, that's $5 billion more than the industry saw nationwide. I guess the news is that Walgreens is tailoring their anti-theft efforts, figuring out that hiring off-duty policemen instead of security companies works best, figuring out that training staff to respond more effectively works best. But meanwhile, other retailers in and around Chicago tell us that they're happy that Walgreens is experiencing a downtick in shrinkage, but they still see the shoplifting and smash and grab trend as a serious problem around here.
All right, so positive development, I guess, but still $95 billion. That's quite a loss for the entire company. Let's move on to the next story. Another major local company, John Deere, they're letting farmers repair their own equipment. How big a deal is this for customers?
This is a really big deal for farmers and other customers of John Deere, so much so, Paris, that they've been fighting for years for the right to repair their own equipment without voiding warranties or violating purchase agreements. When you consider the price tags associated with buying a tractor, not to mention how spread out dealerships are nationwide, they're not always very close by, you can understand why this has been such a flashpoint between farmers and the company. So it's good to see that after years of disputes, both sides seem to be coming to some sort of resolution here.
All right, and lastly, viewers may have seen a billboard or 10 of former Bear great Brian Urlacher's miraculous new hair because of the hair treatment that he's getting. But now Crain's is reporting that Urlacher is involved in a lawsuit related to that hair treatment center. What's going on here?
Well, apparently a Houston-based hair replacement company has been using Brian Urlacher's name and image without his permission in their advertising, and he asserts that no one can monetize his hairline but him, which is fair enough, I suppose, and that's why he's suing this company for damages.
Very interesting. Is this a different company than he was endorsing before?
That's my understanding.
Okay. All right, Ann, we'll see how that plays out. Thanks very much, as always.
Thanks, Paris.
And now to Brandis, we go back to you.
Paris, doctors advise a new strategy for treating childhood obesity, which affects more than 14.7 million young people in the country. The American Academy of Pediatrics says the long-standing practice of so-called watchful waiting isn't working. It's the first time in 15 years the group has issued comprehensive guidelines for treating childhood obesity, advising it should be treated early and perhaps with medication for kids as young as 12. Joining us to talk about these new guidelines is Justin Ryder, Vice Chair of Research for the Department of Surgery at Lurie Children's Hospital. Justin, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So why is the AAP issuing guidelines now? What's changed in the last 15 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. And really what's changed is the evidence base has improved for a number of different treatment options other than behavioral modification and lifestyle modification therapy. There are a number of new medications that are on the market that have been FDA approved and for adolescents 12 to 17 years old who suffer from the disease of obesity. And what these new recommendations do is recommend that adolescents with obesity over the age of 12 be offered the opportunity to try some of these newer weight loss medications in addition to the health, behavior, and lifestyle changes that they're already doing.
So what kind of medication are available? How long should children be taking these? What do we know about them?
Yeah, so there's 6 medications, anti-obesity medications is what we call them, that are FDA approved for adolescents. Some of them are pills, so oral medications, and some are injectable medications. And the injectable medications are very similar to what you would get from an EpiPen. And each of these medications has its pros and cons. Some work on different biological systems. And so it's really a discussion with the patient and the family, with their healthcare provider or pediatrician on which medications they should probably consider.
And it sounds like we're talking about kids as young as 12 right now, but what about kids under the age of 12 who are dealing with obesity?
Yeah, it's a really important question. And there are millions of kids under the age of 12 who struggle from the disease of obesity. And for these kids, most of these medications are not FDA approved yet for that age range. There are trials ongoing for 6 to 11-year-olds for several of these medications. But what can be done is aggressive, intensive behavioral modification and lifestyle modification. The AAP is recommending at least 26 contact hours per year for 6 to 11-year-olds. But eventually, it is our hope that many of these medications will be FDA approved for younger children as well.
So what is the issue then with the practice of watchful waiting, the so-called practice with treating obesity?
I think we've learned a lot over the past 15 years. And what we've learned is that obesity is not somebody's fault. It is a biologically based disease. And hoping and waiting for somebody to grow out of it or for the issue to just resolve itself, I think we know now that that is not going to happen for the majority of children. And if the longer you wait, the worse the disease becomes. Similar to diabetes or hypertension, we need to treat the disease now. And we know that these medications work. Some of the newer medications that have been approved are offering 10 to 15% weight loss in 1 year in adolescents who struggle with obesity. That is a tremendous opportunity to improve not only the medical complications of obesity, but also the psychological and mental health consequences of obesity.
Now, according to the CDC, obesity prevalence was 26% among Hispanic children, 24% among Black children, 16% among white children, and 9% for Asian children. How can doctors be sure that these medications get to those kids that are most impacted?
Unfortunately, there's a significant health disparity. And going along with that significant health disparity, insurance coverage is quite poor for these medications. Hopefully, the more people start to utilize them and the more people and healthcare providers and pediatricians prescribe these medications, hopefully insurance companies will start to wise up and offer these medications as covered entities under their programs. This is not exclusive to children. Adults are having significant issues with having these medications covered. And they're very expensive medications, at least the newer medications are. What we can do as a research community is provide the evidence that these medications are safe, they are effective, and that they are offering long-term sustainable weight loss for these patients. And hopefully the insurance companies will start to do the right thing in covering these medications, because it will not only be cost-effective for them long-term, but also improve the quality of life for the individuals that they should be helping.
On the flip side of that, Justin, are there ever any concerns that doctors might too quickly reach for the medication to treat obesity for kids?
In my opinion, any adolescent who meets the criteria of obesity, which would be a BMI above the 95th percentile, should be offered that medication.
Okay. About a minute left. How should parents talk to their kids about this, Justin?
I think it's a discussion of families along with healthcare providers. Obesity is a serious disease. It comes with a number of health consequences: poorer quality of life, depression, anxiety. And I don't think any parent or healthcare provider wants to see children suffer. And I think that the message is getting out there that we have actual real good treatments now to help kids who struggle with their weight. And these medications offer the potential to help people lose weight along with lifestyle modification and other behavior changes. And so parents need to have this conversation with their pediatrician. Is there something that can be done to help my kid with their weight? And or with other healthcare providers that they might see, whether it's in the community or through the practice that they go to.
Okay. Justin Ryder at Lurie Children's Hospital, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Up next, one-on-one with Exelon's newly appointed CEO. But first, a look at the weather. Former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan, as we said, is set to stand trial on April 1st, 2024. That is 2 years after his indictment alleging that he participated in and benefited from a variety of corruption schemes involving ComEd. We spoke with the new CEO of ComEd's parent company, Exelon, about that and much more on Chicago Tonight Black Voices. We asked Calvin Butler Jr. about how the company is working to move forward.
Thank you for asking, because it's unfortunate. It really was, because all the good work the 6,000 men and women do every day has been tainted by the actions or the alleged actions of a few. And what I can tell you, the men and women every day at ComEd show up to keep the lights on, and they do an amazing job. And ComEd has continued through all the noise to deliver. It was just recently ranked the #1 most reliable utility in the country, has the lowest rates of most urban cities in the top 12, right? Urban city. And that doesn't come from lack of hard work. So my focus has been and will continue to be on the 6,000 men and women who show up to work every day, and we'll get this behind us. Yeah.
And what measures do you take to ensure that something like this doesn't happen again in the future?
No, that's a great question. Immediately, what we did, I think the first thing we did, we went out and hired a compliance officer who had SEC securities background. He put in plans, not just at ComEd, he put in a program across all of our utilities. And we did an audit of each of our businesses to ensure conduct that was alleged was not occurring in any other parts of the business. And I'm pleased to tell you it wasn't. But we put in those robust programs, and now they're a model for other companies across the country. Matter of fact, in the legislation that was passed about 1.5 years ago here in Illinois, the Climate Equity and Jobs Act, they took most of ComEd's compliance efforts and put them into legislation. We're proud of that, and it's a culture shift, and we will continue to work that. We're not done, though, because soon as you relax on programs or ingraining the high ethics and integrity in which we should be known for, in which we pride ourselves, it can fall back into place. So we're on it every day.
So in places like Texas, California, the stability of the power grid, it's an ongoing issue, as you know. What's Exelon doing in places that it serves to ensure energy stability?
We invest tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars into the security, not just the physical security, but the cybersecurity of the grid, because we know there's bad actors who want to attack the system. And our men and women, once again, we're investing in our IT systems, we're investing in our cameras, we're investing in fencing in some of your neighborhoods. You may go by a substation one day and it looks relatively vanilla, but then you go back, the next thing you know, you see high security fencing around it. Those are the efforts that we undertake to ensure that the grid is protected, and we're constantly monitoring it. We have centers located not only in the Mid-Atlantic, but here in Chicago, that monitor the traffic around our substations. So it's very important to us, and it is a priority.
You've talked about delivering energy equitably. Yes. Explain what inequities exist and how do you plan to address them?
Inequities exist because not everyone can afford to put rooftop solar on their homes. Not everyone can afford to purchase an electric vehicle. Not all neighborhoods will have charging stations in them, but we do know the Black and brown communities are disproportionately impacted by climate change. So it's incumbent upon us as your utility company to understand what are we going to do about it and be part of that solution. So once again, in the Climate Equity and Jobs Act, there's legislation focused on ensure that the transition to a decarbonized clean energy future is not leaving those traditionally under-resourced neighborhoods behind. Chicago has 77 neighborhoods, and my goal is to ensure that each of those neighborhoods transition to a clean economy and not one of them get left behind. That's equity to me.
And to that point, how is Exelon positioned for transitioning to renewable energy sources?
Well, the great part about this is that since our split from Constellation, we are your deliverer of electricity. So we're agnostic to what the power comes from, whether it's nuclear, solar, wind, hydro. My job is to deliver it reliably and affordably. So once I do that and build the infrastructure to protect the grid and make the grid more resilient, that's my job each and every day, and that's what we focus on. So Exelon, ComEd specifically, is investing into that infrastructure so it can remove all type of power sources to your home and to your businesses.
And to that point, what is the status of Exelon's infrastructure today? How are you doing?
Doing very well. As I stated earlier, that we were voted the most ComEd, the most reliable utility in the country in 2022. That is because of the $2+ billion we've been investing in that infrastructure, and by working with the regulators and legislators, it's remained affordable. And that's what I'm most proud of, because I recognize for some of our customers, $1 a month is a lot of money. And we really are protecting the rate of change in our bills. And as we transition off of the current rate-making process, that's still very important to us. And we are working with the Commission to make sure that that happens seamlessly and that no one is surprised by a large step increase.
You are now one of just 7 black CEOs currently leading Fortune 500 companies. What does that mean to you?
It means my mother would be very proud. You know, it's an honor. It really is, because you know, I know where I come from. I come from North St. Louis. And the reality of it is that I've had a lot of good people invest in me. And it's my job to invest in others and ensure that, you know, I'm one of 7, but shame on us. It should be one of many. And 7 is not many when you look at the Fortune 500. So what am I doing to ensure that the grounds are being made fertile for others to follow behind me? In addition to that, I recognize the responsibility. My responsibility is first to the 18,000 men and women of Exelon, but then also be representative in the communities that we serve.
Okay, we'll have to leave it there. Calvin Butler Jr., congrats on your new position, new president and CEO of Exelon. You've been on the job for a week?
Yes.
So I hope you're settling in nicely, and we look forward to having you back again.
Thank you, Brandis.
Thank you. Back with more Chicago Tonight right after this.
A hospital photographer by day and a creative photographer by night. Arts correspondent Angel Ito introduces us to a local creative who is using her artistic eye to celebrate an art she says has no limitations.
Physician headshots and surgeries are just some of the images photographer Jordan Porter Woodruff has been taking since joining the team at the University of Chicago Medicine 5 years ago.
One day my boss comes into my office and he gives me this camera and he says, "You have to learn how to use this." And I'm like, oh, okay. And he said, "Take some classes." And that was it. That is exactly how it started.
Now, the pandemic began shortly after one class, but with the technique she learned, Porter Woodruff decided to enhance her craft by taking portraits of creatives she'd always admired.
I started my blog, The Artist Feature, because I have always loved art, collected art, so I decided to just bring it all together.
And before she knew it, Porter Woodruff had created a new collection celebrating her favorite artist. It's now on display in a solo exhibition at the Epiphany Center for the Arts titled Portraits: An Intimate View.
I like an intimate view into these people as artists in their space. Photograph of Nick Cave is him at facility in front of one of his own pieces. The photo of Norman Teague is him in his woodshop. Portrait of Kayla Mahaffey is her actually painting 2 pieces that have since been completed and sold through like ThinkSpace. A cool moment in time. I'm trying to kind of capture what I'm supposed to capture here. I want to show these people, as like, you know, who they are. So the work I do here, it's like my contribution to society on a day-to-day. The hospital is something people come to because they need help. The work is very fulfilling in the sense that it's not about me.
The stories behind Porter Woodruff's personal portraits are different from her work at the University of Chicago Medicine, but she says it's all connected.
I am creative, you know, and this is very much what people would think is not a creative place, but I think it is, you know. Like, for instance, like taking pictures of a surgery is a very cool and creative thing because it's like the angles, like seeing the doctor in there, like them doing their art, like fixing the body. I just so happen to be capturing it from a different angle. A lot of my photography has also come out of my own vulnerability. For me, what I want people to take away from it is, you know, a lot of stuff, a lot of beautiful things can be born out of discomfort. 1, 2, 3.
For Chicago Tonight, I'm Angel Ito.
You can see Portraits: An Intimate View at the Epiphany Center for the Arts through February 11th. And we're back to wrap things up right after this.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by Alexandra and John Nichols, the Jim and Kay Mabey family, the Polk Brothers Foundation, and the support of these donors.
And that's our show for this Monday night. Please join us tomorrow night live at 7. And one note before we go.
It's a big note.
It's a big note, actually. Later this month, Chicago Tonight will be on the move.
Beginning Monday, January 23rd, we'll bring you Chicago Tonight at 10 p.m., Monday through Friday. The Week in Review stays at 7 p.m. on Fridays, and Latino Voices and Black Voices on Saturdays at 6 and 6:30.
Now, of course, this time change comes with expanded investigative reporting, vivid human interest storytelling, and a continued commitment to reporting about you and the many neighborhoods and communities across Chicago and beyond.
We'll also cover the news of the day every day on our website at WTTW.com/news, also in our daily briefing email newsletter, and on all those social media channels.
These changes are being made, of course, with you in mind, and in the days ahead, we will continue to be your essential source for trusted, local, independent news that connects the people and communities in our region. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Brandis Friedman.
And I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a great evening.
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a proud sponsor of diversity, equity, and inclusion-focused free continuing legal education for lawyers throughout the region.